Dear church, let's talk about deacons with Aubrey Johnson. Hello and welcome to the Dear Church podcast. I'm your host, Chris McCurley. I'm excited about my guest today. Aubrey Johnson is joining us. Aubrey, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today.
It's an honor. Thanks for asking.
Absolutely. So I've read a lot of your books. I've got to say my favorite is Barnabas Factor. Love the book. I preached from it, did a Bible class from it when I was first starting out in preaching. Love the book, and I love all that the work that you've done. And I want, before we jump into this discussion on deacons, I want you to maybe talk a little bit about the work that you're currently doing, maybe some projects you're working on, and of course the church that you're with there in Old Hickory.
Well, I've always got a project going on. One of those is a new book on bold faith in a disapproving world.
I like it.
And it's about Stephen. I can't find a good book on Stephen. There aren't many out there, but what an amazing life. When you think about it, his sermon sparked global evangelism.
For sure.
I mean, the next thing you see is Philip going out and then Paul's missionary journeys. But both of those, in some degree, were an outgrowth of what happened to him. And people saw his courageous faith and were inspired by it. So we need bold faith. More than we need methodology or technology, we need bold faith to be successful.
Well said. Yeah. Tell us about the church there. How's that going?
Well, we're in the midst of COVID still. It has taken a great toll and has many challenges associated with it. We've learned a lot and found some blessings along the way. Right now, we're working on trying to be closer and care for each other, developing more intimacy, more connections. And so we have a new ministry we're launching called Lift, lifting up Christ and lifting up each other. But it's about being closer as a church.
Sure.
And I'm really, really excited about that.
That's good. Yeah, I think we're all trying to adapt and adjust with this COVID situation. It's taking a toll on us too, but I'm finding out when I talk to minister friends of mine, I'm sure you have too, that we're all kind of in that same boat. You kind of get discouraged. You look out there and you see, lower numbers than normal, or you're doing more funerals than normal, and you get discouraged. But I think everybody's dealing with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about deacons. So you have a new book on deacons, and that's why I have you on today, because I feel like it's a topic that we're maybe a little vague on sometimes. What exactly is the role of deacon? That whole thing about the preacher does the elder's job, the elders do the deacon's job, and deacons don't know what they're doing. There's probably some truth to that, because there is some vagaries when it comes to the role of deacon. So let's start there. If you were to define or discuss the role of deacon, how would you put it?
Well, the word means servant or minister. I think sometimes we get confused because we think that just means task accomplisher.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are task accomplishers, but a deacon, I think, is a leader in the Lord's church. And leaders work with people and through people. So it's not just doing something, it's doing the right things and doing them in the right way. For instance, if I think my job is just to cut the grass because I'm a deacon in charge of grounds, I may be overlooking the fact that underlying any of the specific assignments is a larger responsibility, and that's to unburden my elders.
Yeah.
That my real job is to help them focus on their shepherding responsibilities because of the extraordinary dependability in the way that I take care of this work. So I have my task and I bless people, but I also want to be blessing my elders. I serve the church, but I'm also trying to serve my eldership. And I think sometimes deacons just miss that. And you can end up being a burr under the saddle of your leaders. And if you're in an adversarial position with your eldership, you don't understand your job.
Right.
So a task, yes. But a couple of other things. I think part of the role is then that we're going to lighten their load the way Aaron and Hur held up the hands of Moses.
Sure.
But also, I believe it's the deacon's job to be a role model.
Yeah.
That the designation is not just an honorific title, but it does kind of put a spotlight on you.
Right.
And when you carry out your duties, you understand I'm not perfect. I'm not Superman. I don't have magical powers or a cape I wear. But people ought to be better off if they know me and see me. I'm not perfect, but I'm always learning. I'm always growing. I'm always overcoming.
Yeah.
And that's just a real, authentic, genuine person who loves the Lord and is in that growth mode. So I would say those two things are often overlooked.
Yeah.
That it's about serving the elders and it's about being a role model. Everett Ferguson called it that we are to be trusted lieutenants to our elders.
I like that.
Lou in the place of, tenant holding a position, but I'm there. They don't have to worry what I'm up to. Mm-hmm. What's Aubrey up to now? You know, what's he into this time? Instead, I can be kind of off their radar, and I'm bringing people together, and I am promoting peace and progress in the church. When the elders can trust me and not worry about what I'm up to, but know that wherever I am, I'm supporting them and their vision. Wherever I am, I'm doing good for the church, not pursuing some private agenda or building some personal coalition, but I am for team number one, the church, not just me, not just my ministry, for my Lord, for my elders, for my church.
Absolutely. I like how you said that it's not just being task oriented, or I think you put it as a task accomplisher, because that's something we've talked about at Oldham Lane. Our mantra is kind of make and grow disciples. And we've talked about what if every deacon's work was directed towards accomplishing that mantra, make and grow disciples. So as the guy that runs the sound, you're not just back there to move the volume up and down. You're back there to help people hear so that they can hear the gospel, so they can hear the message, so that they can grow as a disciple, right? And I think too often we look at it as being task-oriented rather than mission-minded or mission-oriented. I think about Philip. He was one of those 7 that were selected to wait on the Hellenistic Jews, to wait on tables. But just, a couple chapters over, he's out sharing the gospel again. It's like, I did that job. Now I got to get back to what I'm supposed to be doing, which is, spreading the gospel. So I don't think we should be pigeonholing our deacons like you're the sound guy. No, you're the servant who continues to do the Lord's work that also does the sound. I mean, does that make sense?
Yes, it's about, you said being a disciple. It's about being a healthy Christian.
Yeah.
And I think part of this is the balance and the maturity that we're striving for. So being a deacon means I want to kind of show people what it means to be a member of the Oldham Lane or the Old Hickory congregation. Mm-hmm. I want them to see what spiritual maturity looks like. And I want to teach them how to love their elders.
Yeah.
You can love people who aren't perfect and appreciate them for their efforts and their service, and you can cooperate with them. Satan wants us to think elders are supposed to be perfect and flawless. And so those unrealistic expectations set people up for discouragement. I'm glad my wife can love me in my imperfection.
Yeah.
I don't want to be self-satisfied. She doesn't want to encourage me to remain the same. But I'm glad we can love imperfect people because I don't know of any other kind.
Right, exactly. Talk a little bit about the qualifications. So we know they're listed there, and I know that's been a part of your book there. So I'm one that tends to believe, and I think you do as well, that those qualifications are absolutely 100% important when it comes to the selection of a man to serve as a deacon. However, I don't think they're a checklist. I don't think that maybe they're even the only thing to look at. We had Jerry Barber on last week to talk about elders, and he said, they are qualifications that are absolutely important to have the ramifications that far reach beyond just the church even. But as he put it, you don't want old sorehead in there. So I mean, you got to look at personality. You've got to look at, can they work well with others and things like that. So there are some things a little bit beyond the list. What would you say to that as far as the deacon's qualifications?
Yeah, I think the fruit of the Spirit is a great leadership list.
Sure.
It may be the word blameless. A deacon must be blameless. That really calls into play everything that Scripture teaches.
Yeah, it's all encompassing.
I think the Beatitudes are a great leadership list.
Sure.
I mean, that's describing a life of health, a life of blessedness. And so I think there's no question that this is not intended to be the only list, but this is a list of requirements. It says a deacon must be, not might be. A lot of times churches appoint people because they need somebody to help out, and they're kind of desperate, and it's a pretty good boy, and he kind of meets a few of these qualifications. Maybe he shines in one particular area.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have gaps, I mean, we all can grow in these areas. We're not going to have them to a perfect extent. But if you have big gaps, what that means is you're not ready. It's hard enough to do the leadership jobs if you're qualified. But if you're not qualified, because this, as you mentioned, is not a checklist in the sense of an arbitrary list, jump through the hoops. These are the qualities and the characteristics you need to succeed.
Yeah.
And if you don't have them, if somebody puts you in that position, they're setting you up for failure. And that's not a kind thing to do.
Right.
It's better for the safety of the church and for the esteem and progress of the individual to wait until the time is right. And that's not good person versus bad person. You're just talking about, are they ready to do this thing?
Yeah.
And when you look at this list, I think what it is describing is overall life competency.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just about your doctrine, and it's not just about your leadership skills. It's also about your family, and it's about your morals, and it's about your speech. And so what is it describing? It's giving us some buckets here so that we can look and see that this person is healthy and well-rounded, and they're going to be able to handle the full extent of what it means to be a deacon, not just a task accomplisher,
right,
but a role model of righteousness and responsibility, somebody who's a team player who can come along and bless and unburden the eldership. So I love the list. It's a great list for anybody who wants to be a healthy Christian, a healthy friend, spouse, whatever you want to undertake.
Right.
And this list is one you ought to know by memory. I think everybody should know this list. I mean, there's just 10 things on the list. We can do this.
Yeah.
And when you know it, you can pray it, you can ponder it, you can work on it, rather than looking at it as, got in, I'm all clear. No, These are continuous growth areas for great servants in the kingdom.
Yeah. I love how you say unburdening the elders. I don't know that I've ever, I mean, I know that, but I don't know that I've ever really framed it that way. That's a great way to put it, is when we're looking at that role, unburdening the elders. So talk a little bit about how we can ensure that everybody stays in their lane, right? So the elders do their job of shepherding, the preacher does his job of teaching, and the deacons do their job of those tasks that need to be accomplished in and about the church. So how do we clearly define those roles? Where does that start? How does that happen?
Due diligence.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times leadership in the church is stream of consciousness rather than being more intentional and deliberate. I call it the will to lead. Mm-hmm. You need the will to get in and do the things that need to be done to build culture.
Yeah.
And a leadership culture makes everything easier. It seems hard, but if you do the hard things in the beginning, then everything else is so much easier. So what are we talking about? Well, obviously selecting well assures. If a person really is qualified, they don't take as much training up. Mm-hmm. They don't require as much supervision. You can't make enough rules to fix a situation when you appointed somebody who didn't need to be there in the first place. It's like hiring an employee. If they don't have a good work ethic, if they don't have a good character, a training program may not be the answer.
Right.
So if we select well, that's a part of the culture.
Yeah.
That's a part of the culture, that we look at all the qualifications and not just some of the qualifications. I think part of it is the organizational structure. If you want deacons to function well, I think it helps to have an elder that they report to who's invested in their success, mm-hmm. not just that they report to, but an accountability partner who's accountable for helping them learn and grow and for them to enjoy their job. Part of the culture should be that all of our deacons feel well supported.
Right.
We ought to be asking, how well are you getting the resources you need, the support that you need, the direction you need, the encouragement that you need? But we've got to have a culture that asks those questions, that makes that assessment. And if we do, then it gives us something to work on.
Yeah.
I think some other things, along with an accountability partner, most of us need a team. Jesus sent them out in pairs. I like to have every deacon be on one of his fellow deacons' teams.
Yeah.
So I have an area of responsibility. I'm the directly responsible individual, but I'm also a part of one of my colleagues' teams over here. Now, I'm not in charge. I'm not the boss. I'm a part of the team. So I don't carry the burden of directing the whole thing, but I am there to be a part of this mastermind group and to offer support and ideas. And so if every deacon has his direct assignment, but then also a support role, you've got some structure built in where they're getting feedback and accountability and encouragement. I think part of it is you need to make sure that they have a team.
Yeah. So
the leaders of the church to lead need to make sure that happens. Well, we tell them to. Well, it's not about leadership isn't just about telling, but it is about building the culture that supports what we want. So if I want teams, when I appoint somebody, it's number one on the job description.
Yeah.
Which is important for execution. I need a clear job description. But number one on the list is build a team.
Yeah.
And every time they come and report, unless and until that happens, what's the first question you ask?
Yeah.
Tell me about your team. Do you need some help building your team? What have you done? So this is what elders can do to build the culture, clear assignments, clear goals. And I think you talked about not just the deacons, but everybody being in their lane. It seems to me that what's often missing is that we don't bake into the meetings the necessary accountability structures.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're going to move from just being committeemen, pious committeemen, bureaucrats, spiritual bureaucrats, if we're going to move from that, I need to have a template for my meetings that holds me accountable for being people-centered, people-focused.
Yeah.
Who have I extended hospitality to? That is one of the requirements. It's one of the least valued, most overlooked. But it's crucial because if a person is not hospitable, they may not like people that much. They like strategic leadership, but they may not like people that much. You want somebody who loves to be around people, who can't stand it if they're not around people.
Sure.
So if you build that into the meeting, not to embarrass or to coerce, but just to remind, who have you had over to your house this quarter?
Mm-hmm.
Who have you visited this month? Who have you called? That you create this culture of mutual accountability. Without that, you lack the seriousness. You lack the follow-through. You lack the due diligence. So I would say the key is to build it into the culture, the structure that gives you sustainability.
Yeah. I hear you saying that our elders need to empower our deacons, not micromanage, not always standing over them and hawking over them. If you selected them right, if you selected the right people, they're going to get the job done. Let them go get the job done and empower them to do it with those ways that you're talking about. So let me ask you this, Aubrey, how can we train the next group of deacons? Instead of just throwing them to the fire and saying, here, get this done, it needs to be done. Here's the task, do it. How do we train our deacons? I think you're probably going to say what you've been saying is set a culture, but what else would you say?
Well, I'm glad that you said stay out of the weeds. You're not going to train them to lead if they're coming to you constantly for direction.
Right.
And I don't mean that they shouldn't be concerned about pleasing you. I think they should, but when you get down into the weeds, you demotivate deacons. These are men who are accomplished and responsible, and it's just really important to provide high-level direction rather than getting down into the details.
Yeah. That
way you're growing them, and they're learning how to lead. And that means sometimes you let them fail because it's survivable.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the great experiences of life to fail and to rebound, and it's not the end of the world, and I can learn something. That's, I think, important. How do we train them and help them to succeed? I think we need to praise them more from the pulpit, celebrate them, remind people. I think it's good to have opportunities for them to report to the congregation, 5 minutes maybe on different Sundays or Sunday nights. Hey, I'm the deacon in charge of. They're getting to verbalize it. It's going deeper in them. They're recruiting people for their teams. I think that's a good training measure. It could be that they once a year are sharing something in an article to the congregation. Maybe at the most timely moment, you schedule them when it would help their ministry and help them. I think you've got to develop friendships with them. elders don't need to be just authority figures. There needs to be chemistry there. How about if this is fun? Could it be fun? I think there ought to be joy. Christianity is a religion of joy. This ought to be full of joy. And that means that we know each other and care about each other. And it's not just what you can get out of somebody. You probably need apprentice programs for your teenagers, for your younger ones, where they could be connected with the various works in the church. And what a great opportunity to encourage deacons, to let them share some of their experience and knowledge. When they get older, we need coaching and mentoring programs. We need to already, if we don't have enough leaders, it's probably because of something we have not done.
Yeah.
We failed to build the leadership pipeline that's full and provides us with a supply of leaders. We wait until there's a crisis, and then when there's a crisis, we're under pressure, and that makes us make selections we may not should have made. And so I think part of it is a mentoring program. It's classes, it's events. I do dynamic deacon seminars. It could be ongoing coaching. I know right now I have an eldership coaching group. We call it aspiring elders, not current elders.
Yeah.
But men who want to be elders, or they want to see if this is something that they would be interested in or gifted to do. So I've got 18 men, and we have a year we're spending together.
That's neat.
First and third Tuesdays, and it's just about 30 minutes. We just kind of working through a couple of leadership books, Effective Elders and Successful Shepherds, talking about the tools and the traits that you need. But I just think about the average person. Well, what training did you get to be an elder? Well, on the job training. That's how it worked. What if instead they said, well, I worked with Jerry Barber, or I worked with Kirk Brothers, or I worked with Aubrey Johnson, and we went through Kirk's book, Lead Like Jesus, or we went through Aubrey's book on organized overseers, and we talked about how you need to see the future and schedule the future and structure the future and support the future. And I got these tools and this training and encouragement. It's possible. It's possible. It's available. We just have to have the will to lead, the will to get in there and build the culture, the leadership culture that provides this maintenance of responsibility.
Yeah, good stuff. Hey, before we let you go, tell our viewers and listeners how they can get a hold of the book, maybe have you for a seminar. Give us any information you can there.
Probably the best place to go is dynamicdeacons.com.
Okay.
Dynamicdeacons.com. All of my resources are there. You can go to Amazon or to Gospel Advocate and find one of my 16 books on spiritual living, abundant living, and biblical leadership. And one of my favorite books that's out right now is called Parenting by the Parables.
Okay.
Jesus trained his disciples to be leaders with those wonderful stories. So it's about how to become a story parent, story parenting or grandparenting, how to use those signature stories of Jesus at teachable moments to help your child think about life and to grow to meet the demands of life.
That's great.
So parenting by the parables is something people may want to look into.
Absolutely. And I'd encourage our viewers and listeners to do that because I've read much of your stuff and I think it's awesome. And I appreciate you so much for being on today and appreciate the great work that you're doing. I want to tell our guests that if they have a question, you can email me at chris.mccurley@rippleoflight.com. If you have a specific question for Aubrey, we'll make sure that we send it on to him, and I'm sure he'd be glad to answer any questions or comments you might have. have. If you have other questions about resources, how to get a hold of those, ask us that as well, and we'll put you in touch with the right person to get you that stuff. Aubrey, thank you again for joining us, and great blessings to you and what you're doing, okay?
Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you all for tuning in. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Sincerely, Chris.